The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the desolate highway as my girlfriend, Emily, and I cruised through the heart of rural Texas. Our destination, a quaint bed and breakfast nestled in the rolling hills of the countryside, lay just a few hours ahead, promising a weekend of relaxation and escape from the hustle and bustle of city life. As the miles rolled by, the landscape transformed from sprawling fields of corn to dusty expanses of scrubland, dotted with the occasional farmhouse or roadside diner. It was the kind of scenery you only saw in old Western movies, all faded glory and forgotten dreams stretching out as far as the eye could see. But as we neared the halfway point of our journey, the gas gauge on our trusty sedan dipped perilously low, prompting us to pull off the highway in search of fuel. We spotted a small gas station up ahead, its neon sign flickering weakly in the fading light like a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. Pulling into the gravel lot, we breathed a sigh of relief as we spotted the pumps, their dull metal gleaming in the dim glow of the overhead lights. Emily shot me a mischievous grin as she hopped out of the car, eager to stretch her legs and grab a few snacks for the road. I watched her disappear into the convenience store, the door jingling softly in her wake, before turning my attention to the car parked at the nearest pump. It was a beat-up sedan, its once white paint now stained a rusty red with streaks of dried blood splattered across the windows and doors. My heart skipped a beat as I approached, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. Had there been an accident? Was someone hurt? Or worse, was there a killer on the loose, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike again? My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind me, and I turned to see Emily emerging from the store, a bag of chips clutched in one hand and a puzzled expression on her face. "Did you see that car?" I asked, gesturing towards the blood-stained sedan. Emily's eyes widened in horror as she took in the sight, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the nearby highway. "Do you think someone's hurt?" Before I could respond, the door to the convenience store swung open, and the gas station attendant emerged, a bored expression plastered across his face. "Hey, excuse me," I called out, waving him over. "There's a car out here. It looks like there's been some kind of accident." The attendant glanced over at the sedan, his expression unchanged. "Yeah, saw it when I came in for my shift," he replied nonchalantly. "Probably just some drunk idiot who got in over his head. Happens all the time out here." My stomach churned at his callous indifference, but before I could press him further, a sudden noise from the darkness beyond the gas station caught my attention, a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. I turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows, its features obscured by the dim light of the overhead lamps. It moved with a feral grace, its movements fluid and predatory as it stalked towards us with a hungry gleam in its eyes. "Emily, get back in the car," I hissed, my voice barely above a whisper as I reached for the pocket knife tucked into my jeans. But it was too late. With a sudden burst of speed, the figure lunged forward, its claws flashing in the darkness as it bore down on us with murderous intent. We fled into the convenience store, the sound of our footsteps echoing through the empty aisles as we searched desperately for a place to hide. But everywhere we turned, we were met with locked doors and barred windows, our only escape route cut off by the encroaching darkness. And then, just as I thought all hope was lost, I spotted a flicker of movement behind the counter, a trapdoor hidden beneath a pile of empty soda cans, its hinges rusted with age. "Quick, down here!" I shouted, grabbing Emily's hand and pulling her towards the makeshift entrance. Together, we tumbled into the darkness below, the trapdoor slamming shut behind us with a final, resounding thud. We were safe, for now, but as the sounds of our pursuer grew louder above, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were merely trading one nightmare for another. Let's hop onto story number 2, but before I begin reading, make sure that you have subscribed to Mr. Scare for regular horror podcasts. The long stretch of highway seemed to go on forever, winding its way through the heart of the Nevada desert like a ribbon of asphalt stretching towards the horizon. As the headlights of my car cut through the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling of exhaustion that weighed heavy on my shoulders, each mile feeling like an eternity as I pressed onward into the night. But as the fuel gauge on my dashboard dipped dangerously low, I knew I had no choice but to pull off the highway and find a gas station, no matter how remote or desolate it might be. So when I spotted the faint glow of neon up ahead, I breathed a sigh of relief, my tired eyes lighting up at the promise of respite from the endless expanse of desert. Pulling into the gravel lot, I couldn't help but feel a shiver run down my spine as I took in the sight before me. The gas station was a ramshackle affair, its once bright paint now faded and peeling in the harsh desert sun, its windows obscured by a thick layer of grime and dust. And yet, despite its dilapidated appearance, there was something undeniably ominous about the place, a sense of unease that hung heavy in the air like a thick fog. As I stepped out of my car and approached the pump, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end as I scanned the empty lot for any sign of life. But aside from the low hum of the generator and the distant howl of the wind, there was nothing, no sound, no movement, nothing but the vast emptiness of the desert stretching out before me. Shaking off my unease, I grabbed the nozzle and began to pump gas into my car, my eyes darting nervously around the station as I waited for the tank to fill. But as I glanced towards the windows of the convenience store, I froze, my heart skipping a beat as I spotted something, a shadowy figure moving behind the glass, its movements slow and deliberate as it prowled the dimly lit interior. My breath caught in my throat as I watched, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. Who was this person? Where had they come from? And most importantly, why were they skulking around a deserted gas station in the middle of nowhere? Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, I set down the pump and made my way towards the store, my footsteps echoing loudly in the stillness of the night. But as I reached for the door, I froze, my hand hovering inches away from the handle as I realized, with a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, that it was locked tight, the windows barred and reinforced with heavy metal grates. Panic surged through me as I rattled the door handle, my mind racing with fear as I realized that I was trapped, alone and vulnerable in the darkness. But just as I was about to give in to despair, I heard a voice, a faint whisper, barely audible over the sound of the wind. "Help me." The words hung in the air like a prayer, and for a moment, I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest as I debated whether to heed the mysterious voice or flee into the night. But as the whisper grew louder, more insistent, I knew I had no choice but to investigate, to uncover the truth behind the gas station's sinister facade, no matter the cost. With a deep breath, I squared my shoulders and turned towards the sound, my footsteps echoing loudly in the silence as I made my way towards the source of the voice. And as I rounded the corner of the building, what I saw sent a chill down my spine, a trapdoor hidden beneath a pile of empty crates, its rusty hinges creaking softly in the desert breeze. With trembling hands, I reached for the latch and pulled the door open, revealing a staircase leading down into the darkness below. And as I descended into the depths of the gas station, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to uncover something truly terrifying, something that would change my life forever. The road stretched out before me, endless and desolate, as I drove my truck through the heart of the Texas desert. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon, leaving nothing but darkness in its wake, and the only company I had was the low hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. But as the miles rolled by, I felt the familiar call of nature tugging at my bladder, urging me to find a place to pull over and relieve myself. So when I spotted the dim glow of a gas station up ahead, I breathed a sigh of relief, my tired eyes lighting up at the promise of a much-needed pit stop. Pulling into the gravel lot, I couldn't help but notice how rundown the place looked, the paint on the walls faded and peeling, the windows covered in a thick layer of grime. But as desperate as I was, I knew I had no choice but to brave the filth and use the restroom, no matter how unappealing it might be. Stepping out of my truck, I made my way towards the entrance, the crunch of gravel beneath my boots echoing loudly in the stillness of the night. But as I pushed open the door and stepped inside, I felt a chill run down my spine, a sense of unease that hung heavy in the air like a thick fog. The gas station was deserted, the only sound the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. But as I made my way towards the restroom at the back of the store, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end as I glanced nervously around the empty aisles. Reaching the door to the restroom, I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering inches away from the handle as a sense of dread washed over me. But with a deep breath, I pushed open the door and stepped inside, the smell of mildew and decay hitting me like a punch to the gut. The restroom was dimly lit, the flickering fluorescent bulbs casting long shadows across the cracked linoleum floor. And as I made my way towards the nearest stall, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that I was not alone in the darkness. But before I could react, I heard it, the sound of someone breathing, slow and labored, coming from the stall next to me. My blood ran cold as I listened, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end as I realized that whoever, or whatever, was in there with me was not human. With trembling hands, I reached for the latch and pushed open the door, my heart pounding in my chest as I braced myself for what I might find. But as the door swung open, I was met with nothing but darkness, a void so deep and empty that it seemed to swallow me whole. And then, just as I was about to turn and flee, I heard it, the whisper of a voice, soft and sinister, echoing through the darkness like a ghostly apparition. "Get out." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and for a moment, I hesitated, my mind racing with fear as I tried to make sense of what was happening. But as the whisper grew louder, more insistent, I knew I had no choice but to obey, to flee into the night and never look back. With a cry of terror, I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing loudly in the empty gas station as I made my way towards the exit. And as I burst through the door and into the cool night air, I felt a sense of relief wash over me, a sense of freedom from the terror that had gripped me inside. But as I climbed back into my truck and pulled away from the gas station, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me, that whatever lurked in the darkness of that forsaken place was not content to let me escape so easily. And as I drove into the night, the memory of the whispering voice echoing in my mind, I knew that I would never be able to forget the terror that I had encountered in that haunted gas station. The clock on my bedside table read 2 a.m. as I lay awake in the darkness, my mind racing with the thrill of adventure. For weeks now, I had heard rumors swirling around town about the old gas station at the edge of the woods, a place said to be haunted by the spirits of those who had met untimely ends within its walls. I couldn't resist the pull of curiosity any longer. With a silent vow to myself, I slipped out of bed and into the stillness of the night, careful not to wake my sleeping parents as I crept downstairs and out the front door. The air outside was cool and crisp, the moon casting an eerie glow over the silent streets as I made my way towards the gas station, my heart pounding with excitement and fear in equal measure. The walk felt like an eternity, each step bringing me closer to my destination and the unknown horrors that awaited me there. Finally, I reached the gas station, its weathered exterior looming ominously in the moonlight. The windows were dark, the only sound the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze as I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The interior of the gas station was even more eerie than I had imagined, deserted aisles lined with shelves of long-expired goods, the air thick with the musty scent of neglect. But as I made my way deeper into the store, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes were following my every move with malicious intent. It was then that I heard it, the sound of chanting echoing through the empty aisles, low and guttural, sending shivers down my spine as I followed the sound to the back of the store. And there, bathed in the glow of flickering candles, I saw them, a group of hooded figures gathered around a makeshift altar, their voices raised in unholy praise to some unseen deity. I froze in place, my breath catching in my throat as I watched in horror, unable to tear my eyes away from the scene unfolding before me. The figures moved with a fluid grace, their movements synchronized as they performed their macabre ritual, their faces hidden beneath the shadows of their hoods. But as I watched, a sense of dread washed over me, a feeling that I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I had bargained for. And when one of the figures turned towards me, their eyes burning with a malevolent light, I knew that I had been discovered. With a cry of terror, I turned and fled, the sound of my footsteps echoing loudly in the empty store as I raced towards the exit. But as I reached the door and pushed it open, I felt a hand close around my ankle, dragging me to the ground with a force that sent pain shooting through my body. I struggled against my attacker, kicking and thrashing with all my might as I fought to break free. And just when I thought I couldn't hold on any longer, I felt the grip around my ankle loosen, and I scrambled to my feet, running as fast as I could into the night. As I ran, I could hear the sound of pursuit behind me, the hooded figures hot on my heels as I made my way through the darkness. But no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were gaining on me, that their malevolent presence was closing in, ready to consume me whole. And as I burst out of the trees and into the safety of the streetlights, I knew that I had narrowly escaped with my life. But the memory of what I had seen in that haunted gas station would stay with me forever, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beneath the surface of the world. The road stretched out before me, an endless ribbon of asphalt cutting through the darkness of the night. I had been driving for hours, the only company the steady hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of static from the radio. But as I approached a desolate stretch of highway in the heart of nowhere, something changed. A faint sound began to filter through the speakers, barely audible at first but growing steadily louder with each passing mile. It was a strange, otherworldly noise, a series of clicks and whirs that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. I tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the road ahead, but the noise persisted, growing louder and more insistent with each passing moment. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the static resolved itself into words, a voice speaking in a language I couldn't understand, its tone urgent and filled with dread. I glanced at the radio in confusion, but there was no indication of where the transmission was coming from. It was as if the voice was emanating from the very air itself, a ghostly presence haunting the night. I tried to change the station, to drown out the voice with the comforting sounds of music or talk radio, but no matter what I did, the transmission persisted, growing louder and more insistent with each passing mile. As I drove, the voice began to speak of things too terrible to comprehend, of ancient evils lurking just beyond the edge of reality, waiting to claim me as their own. It spoke of darkness and despair, of a world where nightmares walked the earth and the very fabric of reality was torn asunder. I felt a chill run down my spine as I listened, my hands gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. There was something about the voice, something that filled me with a sense of unease unlike anything I had ever felt before. And then, just as I reached the darkest stretch of the highway, the transmission changed, a burst of static followed by a series of coordinates flashing across the radio display. I glanced at them in confusion, my heart pounding in my chest as I realized what they meant, that whatever was speaking to me wanted me to follow, to venture into the heart of darkness and confront whatever lay waiting there. I hesitated for only a moment before making a decision. I had to know what lay at the end of those coordinates, had to confront the source of the voice that had haunted me for so long. With a sense of grim determination, I steered the car off the highway and onto a narrow dirt road leading into the wilderness. The darkness seemed to close in around me as I drove, the only illumination coming from the headlights cutting through the night. The road twisted and turned, leading me deeper and deeper into the heart of the wilderness, until finally, I reached the end of the coordinates, a clearing in the forest bathed in the pale light of the moon. I parked the car and stepped out into the cool night air, my heart pounding in my chest as I surveyed my surroundings. There was nothing here, no sign of the mysterious voice that had led me here, no indication of what lay waiting in the darkness. The sound of footsteps, soft and almost imperceptible at first, echoed through the dense thicket of trees surrounding me. Each step seemed to reverberate through the stillness of the night, sending shivers down my spine as I strained to listen, my senses on high alert for any sign of danger. My breath caught in my throat, a cold knot of fear tightening in my chest as I stood rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the eerie sound. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, to flee from whatever unseen horror lurked in the darkness, but I couldn't move. I was trapped, ensnared in the grip of an unseen force that held me in place like a fly caught in a spider's web. The footsteps drew closer, each one sending a jolt of terror coursing through my veins. I could hear the crunch of leaves beneath heavy boots, the rustle of branches as something, or someone, moved through the underbrush with purposeful intent. And then, just when I thought I couldn't bear it anymore, the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the ragged sound of my own breathing as I strained to listen for any sign of movement. But there was nothing. No sound, no movement, just the oppressive weight of the darkness pressing in around me, suffocating me with its suffocating embrace. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my heart pounding in my chest as I waited for something, anything, to happen. But there was nothing. No sign of the mysterious presence that had haunted me, no indication of what had led me to this forsaken place in the first place. With a sense of mounting dread, I forced myself to take a step forward, my eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. But there was nothing, just the empty expanse of the forest stretching out before me, silent and still as the grave. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the silence was shattered by a blood-curdling scream that tore through the night like a knife through butter. It was a sound of pure agony, filled with a primal terror that chilled me to the bone and sent my heart racing with fear. I turned and fled, stumbling blindly through the underbrush as I raced back to the safety of my car. But even as I ran, the scream echoed in my ears, haunting me with its terrible intensity. I reached the car and threw myself inside, slamming the door shut behind me with trembling hands. I fumbled for the keys, my fingers shaking as I struggled to start the engine and get as far away from that accursed place as possible. As I drove away, the scream still ringing in my ears, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me, that whatever had made that terrible sound was still out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting to strike again.